All right, so today we're taking a deep dive with you into antibiotics, specifically two groups called Carbapenems and Monobactams.
Okay.
And the source material that you sent for this deep dive is a YouTube video
Yes.
by clinical pharmacology Dr. Khaled M. Hassan.
Mm-hmm.
And it's titled Carbapenems and Monobactams, Antibiotics Pharmacology.
Right.
And, I think when people hear antibiotics, they think, oh, that's kind of dry.
Yeah.
But this is actually way more interesting than it might seem at first glance.
Absolutely.
Because we're talking about some seriously powerful weapons here against bacterial infections.
Yeah.
And the kind that can even reach those tricky places like the cerebrospinal fluid.
Right.
So that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And plus, there's a real medical mystery element to this.
Uh-huh.
Scientists had to get really creative to overcome a problem with one of these drugs.
Yes.
To make it both safer and more effective.
It's a fascinating story of how drug development works.
Yeah.
That constant push and pull between effectiveness and safety.
Right.
And to really appreciate what makes carbapenems and monobactams so special, we need to start with their family tree.
Okay.
They belong to a larger group of antibiotics called beta-lactams.
Okay. I remember hearing about beta-lactams.
Yeah.
They work by disrupting the building process of bacterial cell walls, right?
Exactly.
It's kind of like sabotaging the construction of a fortress.
Yes. Bacteria rely on their cell walls for protection.
Right.
And beta-lactams interfere with the mortar that holds those walls together.
Whoa.
Without a strong wall, the bacteria can't survive.
Interesting.
Now, within this beta-lactam family, carbapenems are kind of like the all-star team.
Okay.
The video you shared mentions 4 main players: imipenem, meropenem, ertapenem, and doripenem.
Yeah, and they even showed what the actual medications look like.
Right.
Which is cool.
Yeah.
And one thing that stood out to me is that all carbapenems are given intravenously.
Yes.
So straight into the bloodstream.
That's right.
Why is that?
Well, it's partly because they need to act fast.
Okay.
And delivering medication directly into the bloodstream is like an express delivery service for your body.
Wow.
It allows the drugs to reach most tissues and fluids very quickly.
Right.
Which is essential when you're dealing with serious infections. But there's another reason.
Okay.
And this is where that medical mystery comes in.
Okay.
Imipenem, one of the first carbapenems discovered, ran into a little bit of a roadblock.
Roadblock? What happened?
Well, it was effective.
Okay.
But there was a catch.
Oh.
Imipenem is vulnerable to an enzyme called dehydropeptidase.
Okay.
Which is found primarily in the kidneys.
Okay.
Imagine this enzyme as a tiny but very hungry Pac-Man in your kidneys, munching away at the imipenem.
Oh, no.
And this caused 2 problems.
Okay.
First, it reduced the amount of imipenem available to fight the infection.
Right.
And second, the breakdown process created potentially toxic byproducts.
That doesn't sound good.
Not what you want happening when you're trying to fight off an infection, right?
Definitely not.
So
what did they do? Was imipenem just doomed to fail?
Well, this is where things get really ingenious.
Oh.
Scientists discovered a way to protect imipenem from that pesky dehydropeptidase.
Oh, really?
They developed a compound called cilastatin.
Okay.
Which basically acts as imipenem's bodyguard.
Bodyguard.
Yes. Cilastatin blocks the enzyme.
Wow.
Prevents it from breaking down imipenem.
Okay.
And allows the antibiotic to do its job.
That's incredible.
So now it comes as a combination therapy, imipenem with cilastatin.
Imipenem with cilastatin. Okay.
Yes.
But wait, didn't the video also mention another carbapenem, meropenem?
Yes.
Did it have the same problem?
Well, that's the beauty of scientific progress. Learning from challenges often leads to better solutions. And meropenem is like imipenem 2.0.
Okay.
It's structurally similar.
It's okay.
But it avoids the dehydropeptidase issue altogether.
So researchers essentially learned from the challenges they faced with imipenem.
Yes.
And designed a drug that just bypassed that whole problem.
Exactly.
That's some seriously clever pharmacology.
It is.
Did they encounter any other hurdles along the way?
Well, there was one other advantage that meropenem brought to the table.
Okay.
High doses of imipenem were associated with a risk of seizures.
Oh.
But meropenem doesn't carry that same risk.
So meropenem is like the improved sequel.
You could say that.
More stable, safer.
Yeah.
Just as effective.
Yes.
But you mentioned that there are 2 other carbapenems, ertapenem and doripenem.
Right.
What makes them unique? Why would a doctor choose one over the other?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it gets to the heart of why understanding these nuances is so important.
Right.
Each carbapenem has its own personality, so to speak.
Okay.
For example, ertapenem, unlike imipenem and meropenem, is given once a day.
Oh,
making it a more convenient option for some patients.
Right.
Doripenem, on the other hand,
right.
has a longer half-life.
Okay.
Meaning it stays in the body for a longer time, which can be beneficial in certain cases.
I see.
The choice often comes down to factors like the specific bacteria being targeted,
right,
the severity of the infection,
okay,
and the patient's overall health.
So it's like a strategic decision.
It is.
Choosing the right tool for the job.
Exactly.
Not just one size fits all.
No.
But before we get too deep into the Carbapenem family, let's switch gears and talk about that lone wolf you mentioned earlier.
Okay.
The Monobactam aztreonam.
Yes.
What's its story?
Aztreonam.
Yeah.
It's definitely a specialist, not a jack of all trades like the Carbapenems.
Gotcha.
While Carbapenems are considered broad-spectrum antibiotics, effective against a wide range of bacteria.
Right.
Aztreonam has a more focused target, gram-negative bacteria, especially those that live in the gut.
So it's like a sniper taking aim at a specific target.
Yes.
As opposed to a shotgun approach. Why would you choose a narrow-spectrum antibiotic like aztreonam over a broad-spectrum one?
Well, that's a question that highlights the delicate balance in antibiotic therapy.
Okay.
Sometimes using a broad-spectrum antibiotic is like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut.
Okay.
It gets the job done, but it might cause unnecessary damage.
Oh, okay.
In this case, that damage would be to the good bacteria that naturally live in our bodies and play an important role in keeping us healthy. It's like accidentally weakening our defenses while trying to fight off an attacker.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So aztreonam is like a more targeted approach.
Yes.
Minimizing the risk of disrupting the body's ecosystem.
That's right.
But are there any other reasons why a doctor might choose aztreonam?
Actually, there's a very specific advantage that aztreonam offers. Remember how we talked about beta-lactams being a family of antibiotics?
Yes.
Well, sometimes people develop allergies to certain members of that family.
Oh, right.
Particularly penicillins and cephalosporins. Aztreonam, being the lone wolf that it is, has a different structure.
Right.
And doesn't typically cause allergic reactions.
Oh, wow.
In people who are allergic to those other beta-lactams.
That's really useful information.
It is.
Because penicillin allergies are pretty common, right?
They are.
So having a safe alternative is crucial.
Yes.
Are there any downsides to aztreonam?
Well, there are some potential side effects, as with any medication.
Right.
The video mentioned phlebitis, which is inflammation of the veins, and elevated liver enzymes, which can be a sign of liver stress.
I see.
But overall, aztreonam is a valuable tool in the antibiotic arsenal, especially for patients with specific allergies.
This is all so fascinating.
It is.
We've gone from talking about fortress walls to Pac-Man to snipers, all in the context of these incredible molecules that can either save lives or, if used incorrectly, contribute to a global health crisis.
That's right.
But I'm sensing that the story of Carbapenems and Monobactams doesn't end there.
It doesn't.
What other secrets do these antibiotics hold?
You're right. There's so much more to uncover.
Okay.
And that brings us to a critical issue.
Okay.
Antibiotic resistance.
Oh.
Stay with us as we dive deeper into this complex and pressing challenge in the world of medicine.
So we've established that Carbapenems are like the heavy hitters.
Yeah.
Effective against a wide range of bacteria.
Right.
And aztreonam is more of a specialist targeting specific types.
Yes.
But you just mentioned antibiotic resistance.
Yes.
How do these two groups of antibiotics fit into that bigger picture?
Well, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
And honestly, a bit concerning.
Oh.
You see, the very thing that makes carbapenems so valuable, their broad-spectrum activity can also be their Achilles heel.
Okay.
When it comes to antibiotic resistance.
I see.
It's like this. When you use a broad-spectrum antibiotic, you're essentially carpet bombing the bacterial population.
And that's a problem because...
Well, you're not just killing the bad bacteria that are causing the infection.
Right.
You're also wiping out a lot of the good bacteria that naturally live in our bodies.
Okay.
The ones that help keep things in balance and actually protect us from harmful bacteria.
So it's like accidentally weakening our defenses while trying to fight off an attacker.
Exactly. It creates an opportunity for the bacteria that are already resistant to antibiotics to thrive. They're like the survivors of the attack.
Right.
And now they have more space and resources to multiply and spread.
So that's not good.
No.
One of the reasons why doctors are increasingly cautious about prescribing broad-spectrum antibiotics.
Right.
Unless they're absolutely necessary.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So if using broad-spectrum antibiotics too often can contribute to resistance, what's the alternative? Are we supposed to just stick to narrow-spectrum antibiotics like aztreonam all the time?
Well, it's not quite that simple.
Okay.
Remember, aztreonam is very specific in its targets.
Right.
It's great for certain types of gram-negative bacteria.
Yeah.
But it won't be effective against others.
Okay.
And sometimes, especially in serious infections, doctors need to act quickly before they have the results of tests that can tell them exactly which bacteria is causing the problem.
I see.
In those cases, a broad-spectrum antibiotic might be the best initial choice.
Okay.
Even with the risks associated with resistance.
Yeah.
It's a tough call.
It is.
And it really highlights the challenges doctors face every day.
So it sounds like it's all about finding the right balance.
Yes.
Weighing the benefits of a broad-spectrum antibiotic against the potential risks of contributing to resistance.
Exactly.
But how do doctors know which antibiotic to choose?
Right.
It's just a guess.
It's definitely not a guessing game.
Okay.
Doctors rely on a combination of factors to make those decisions. They consider things like the patient's symptoms, medical history, and the suspected source of the infection, and whenever possible, they'll try to get a culture of the bacteria causing the infection.
A culture, like growing bacteria in a petri dish.
Exactly. It's like doing a little detective work to identify the culprit once they know what they're dealing with. Yeah. They can choose the antibiotic that's most likely to be effective.
Okay.
While minimizing the risk of resistance. Sometimes it's a narrow-spectrum antibiotic like aztreonam.
Right.
Other times it's a broad-spectrum carbapenem. It really depends on the situation.
Okay, so it's a strategic decision.
It is.
You don't just throw antibiotics at the problem and hope something sticks.
Yeah, you don't.
But even with careful prescribing, isn't antibiotic resistance still a huge problem?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a global health crisis.
Right.
And it's getting worse.
Oh.
The bacteria are constantly evolving and finding new ways to resist the antibiotics we use against them.
Oh, no.
It's like an arms race.
Yeah.
And right now, the bacteria are winning.
That's pretty scary.
It is.
What can we do about it?
Yeah.
Is it all doom and gloom, or is there any hope?
There is hope.
Okay.
But it's going to take a multi-pronged approach to tackle this problem, first and foremost.
Yeah.
We need to be much more careful about how we use antibiotics.
Okay.
That means taking them only when they're truly necessary and completing the full course of treatment as prescribed by a doctor.
So no more saving leftover antibiotics for a rainy day?
Definitely not.
Okay, got it.
Every time you take antibiotics unnecessarily, you're essentially giving the bacteria a training session in how to become resistant.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
What else can we do?
We also need to invest in research and development of new antibiotics.
Okay.
The pipeline has been pretty dry for the last few decades.
Yeah.
And we're running out of effective options.
I can see how that would be a huge problem.
It is.
What if we run out of antibiotics altogether?
It's a frightening thought.
It is.
And it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important to support efforts to develop new antibiotics.
Right.
As well as alternative strategies like phage therapy and antimicrobial peptides, which offer new ways to combat bacterial infections.
I'm starting to realize just how complex this whole issue is.
It is complex.
It's not just about individual patients taking pills.
Right.
It's a global challenge that requires a global response.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
The actions we take today, both individually and collectively, will determine the future of antibiotics.
Wow.
And our ability to combat bacterial infections effectively.
So bringing it back to carbapenems and monobactams.
Yes.
How does all of this impact their use?
Knowing what we now know about antibiotic resistance, it underscores the importance of using these drugs judiciously.
Yeah.
Carbapenems, in particular, are often considered last resort antibiotics.
I see.
They're reserved for situations where other antibiotics have failed, or when the infection is extremely serious.
Right.
This strategy is aimed at preserving their effectiveness for as long as possible.
So it's almost like they're being held in reserve.
Yes.
Like a precious weapon that you don't want to waste.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And it underscores the importance of understanding that not all antibiotics are created equal.
Right.
Some, like carbapenems, are more valuable than others because of their unique properties. And the fact that they're often our last line of defense against certain types of bacteria.
That's a powerful reminder that we can't take these medications for granted.
We can't.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the key takeaway you want listeners to walk away with?
I think the biggest takeaway is that antibiotics are both powerful and precious. Yeah.
They have the potential to save lives.
Right.
But they also have the potential to become ineffective if we don't use them wisely.
That's true.
It's a responsibility that falls on all of us, patients, doctors, policymakers, to ensure that these life-saving drugs remain effective for generations to come.
Wow. This deep dive has been incredibly eye-opening.
It has.
And I feel like I have a whole new appreciation for the complexity and importance of antibiotics.
I'm glad to hear that.
It's amazing how much we've uncovered in this deep dive. I started out thinking antibiotics were pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
But it turns out there's a whole universe of complexity behind them.
Absolutely. Antibiotics are a fascinating intersection of chemistry, biology, and even sociology.
Wow.
They touch upon so many aspects of our lives.
Right.
From individual health to global public policy.
Speaking of global impact,
yeah,
you mentioned that antibiotic resistance is a worldwide crisis.
It is.
Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Like, how does what happens in one part of the world affect what happens in another when it comes to antibiotic resistance?
It's all about interconnectedness.
Okay.
Think of it like this bacteria don't respect national borders.
Right.
They travel with us.
Okay.
In our bodies, on our food, even in the air we breathe.
So if someone in, say, Southeast Asia uses antibiotics improperly,
yes,
could that potentially lead to the development of resistant bacteria?
Absolutely.
That could eventually make their way to, say, North America.
Exactly. And it's not just about individual travelers.
Oh, okay.
The widespread use of antibiotics in agriculture, for example, can contribute to the emergence of resistant bacteria that can then spread through food supply chains or even through the environment.
Yeah.
It's a complex web of interconnected factors that highlights the global nature of this challenge.
So it really is a problem that requires a global solution.
It does.
What are some of the things that are being done on a global scale to address antibiotic resistance?
Well, there are a lot of efforts underway, which is encouraging.
That's good to hear.
The World Health Organization has launched a global action plan to combat antimicrobial resistance, which includes initiatives to improve surveillance, promote responsible use of antibiotics, and foster research and development of new treatments.
That's good to hear, but it sounds like a daunting task.
It is a big task.
Are there any success stories? Any reasons to be optimistic?
There are definitely reasons to be optimistic. Some countries have implemented successful programs to reduce antibiotic use in hospitals and in the community.
That's great.
And there are some promising new approaches being explored, like phage therapy, which uses viruses that specifically target bacteria.
Interesting.
And antimicrobial peptides, which are naturally occurring molecules with antibacterial properties.
Those sound fascinating. It seems like we're on the cusp of a whole new era in the fight against bacterial infections.
I think so.
But what about Carbapenems and Monobactams specifically?
Yes.
How has the threat of antibiotic resistance impacted their use?
Well, it's made their responsible use even more critical. Carbapenems in particular are often considered last resort antibiotics.
I see.
They're reserved for situations where other antibiotics have failed. Or when the infection is extremely serious. This strategy is aimed at preserving their effectiveness for as long as possible.
So it's almost like they're being held in reserve.
Yeah.
Like a precious weapon that you don't want to waste.
That's a great way to put it. It underscores the importance of understanding that not all antibiotics are created equal. Some, like carbapenems, are more valuable than others because of their unique properties and the fact that they're often our last line of defense against certain types of bacteria.
Wow. That's a powerful reminder that we can't take these medications for granted.
No, we can't.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the key takeaway you want listeners to walk away with?
I think the biggest takeaway is that antibiotics are both powerful and precious. They have the potential to save lives.
Yes.
But they also have the potential to become ineffective if we don't use them wisely.
That's right.
It's a responsibility that falls on all of us.
Yeah.
Patients, doctors, policymakers.
Right.
To ensure that these life-saving drugs remain effective for generations to come.
I couldn't agree more. This deep dive has been incredibly eye-opening.
Good.
And I feel like I have a whole new appreciation for the complexity and importance of antibiotics.
Me too.
To our listeners, thank you for sharing your source material with us.
Yes, thank you.
We hope this deep dive has equipped you with a better understanding of carbapenems, monobactams, and the critical issue of antibiotic resistance.
Right.
Remember, knowledge is power.
It is.
And the more we understand about these medications, the better equipped we are to use them responsibly.
Absolutely.
And ensure their effectiveness for the future.
Yes.
Until next time, stay curious.
Stay curious.
Keep learning, and thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.
Thanks for having me.